It's 3 a.m. Your eyes open. The room is dark and quiet, and for a moment, you don't move. Then, the panic creeps in. Why am I awake? You check the time. You do the math on how many hours of sleep you have left, and the number makes your chest tighten. You tell yourself something is wrong with you, but the real answer is far stranger. Waking up in the middle of the night isn't a malfunction. It might be the most natural thing your body still remembers how to do. For most of human history, nobody slept the way you're told to sleep now. 8 hours, one solid block, lights off and eyes shut until morning. That idea is new. It's younger than indoor plumbing. Your ancestors slept differently, and they weren't lying there in misery while they did it. They were doing something else entirely. Something with a purpose you've forgotten how to recognize. To understand it, you have to go back further than electricity, further than candles. Imagine a world with no light switch, no street lamp, no screen glowing in your palm. When the sun went down, your environment didn't just get dark, it got dangerous. Predators move at night. So do rival groups. So does the cold creeping into a body that has no walls to stop it. Sleep in that world wasn't a private retreat into unconsciousness. It was a vulnerability that had to be managed by the group, hour by hour, until light came back.
That's where the historian A. Roger Eckerch comes in. He spent years digging through old court records, diaries, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and he kept finding something strange. People described 2 sleeps in a single night. A first sleep, then a stretch of waking activity in the middle of the night, then a second sleep before dawn. This wasn't rare. It was so common that the phrase first sleep shows up casually in old documents, the way you'd mention breakfast in a letter today. What did people do during that waking window? They prayed. They talked. They had sex. They tended the fire so it wouldn't die out before morning. Some got up and visited neighbors who were also awake. Farmers checked on animals. Mothers nursed children who'd stirred. None of it was treated as insomnia. It was simply part of the night, a quiet second life tucked inside the dark hours, expected and unremarkable, the way a lunch break is expected in the middle of a workday.
Eckerch found something else, too, something easy to miss at first glance. The hour between the 2 sleeps wasn't a void to be endured. People used it deliberately. Letters and diaries from the period describe waking during the first sleep to mend clothing, settle an argument too complicated for daylight, or simply lie still and think once the household had finally gone quiet and nobody needed anything from you. There was no shame attached to any of it.
Why would the body want to wake up like that on purpose? A psychiatrist named Thomas Ware decided to test it directly. In the early 1990s, he ran an experiment where participants lived for weeks with no artificial light after sunset. No lamps, no screens, just long, unbroken darkness, the kind a body would have experienced for almost all of human history before electricity existed. Within a few weeks, something shifted. The subject's sleep split into 2 distinct phases, with a calm period of wakefulness sitting in between, almost identical to the pattern Eckerch had found buried in old diaries. They weren't trying to do this. Nobody told them to. Their bodies simply drifted back into an older rhythm once given enough darkness and enough time. Ware's experiment suggested something unsettling for anyone who's ever felt broken at 3 a.m. Fragmented sleep isn't a disorder. It might be the default setting sitting underneath the one modern light has painted over.
There's a deeper layer here, one that pulls you out of candlelit Europe and back toward the campfire itself. The sleep researcher Jerome Siegel studies hunter-gatherer societies that still live largely without electricity, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania and the San in Namibia. He expected to find people falling asleep the instant it got dark and waking with the sun, a perfectly tuned natural clock running on sunlight alone. Instead, he found something messier. People often stayed up well past sunset, talking quietly around the fire, drifting in and out of rest.
Their total sleep time, measured carefully across many nights, looked surprisingly close to what people in industrialized countries get, sometimes even a little less. What was different wasn't the amount of sleep, it was the shape of it, loose and broken into pieces rather than poured into one rigid block. And almost none of them reported anxiety about insomnia, even though their sleep, by modern Western standards, would look irregular and fragmented. They simply didn't have the concept of lying awake and treating it as a personal failure. The wakefulness wasn't a problem in need of a solution. It was just another texture of being a person at night.
Sit with what that actually means. Your ancestors weren't sleeping straight through 8 hours, not because they lacked the discipline, but because their world never asked that of them, and their minds never learned to expect it. Someone had to keep half an ear on the dark while the rest of the group lay vulnerable around a dying fire. A body that startled awake in the small hours wasn't broken. It was useful. In a very real, very physical sense, it was doing exactly the job evolution built it for. Think about how a group would have actually slept, shoulder to shoulder around a shared fire, with no door to lock and no walls to soften the sounds of the night. In that arrangement, staggered waking isn't a flaw in the system, it's the system. If everyone fell into deep, unbroken sleep at the exact same time, nobody would hear the snap of a branch outside the firelight, or notice the fire dimming toward embers, or sense a child crying in the dark before it became an emergency. A population that woke in scattered, overlapping waves across the night was safer than one that slept in perfect, identical unison. Some researchers studying ancestral sleep patterns suspect this staggered wakefulness wasn't incidental. It may have been selected for, generation after generation, precisely because the groups who kept a loose, rotating watch through the night were the groups who survived it. So why does it feel so different now, lying in your own bed in a locked house with no fire and no predators anywhere near you? Because the world changed faster than your biology could keep up with. Artificial light didn't just let you stay up later, it erased the long, unbroken darkness that used to cue your body into that older two-phase pattern in the first place. Modern life removed the watchfire, the unhurried hours of low talk in the dark, the quiet cultural permission to simply be awake at 3 a.m. without judging yourself for it. What got left behind was the waking itself, stripped of every bit of context that used to explain it. You still wake up, you just don't know why anymore, and nobody ever told you it was supposed to happen.
That's the cruelest part of the whole story. The behavior survived intact. The meaning didn't. Modern sleep, the single, uninterrupted block most people chase and feel guilty about missing, is a remarkably recent invention. Gaslight, then electric light, then the rigid demands of factory shift schedules trained entire populations to compress sleep into one tidy window, because that's what an industrial economy needed from its workers. A factory doesn't care whether your body wants 2 sleeps. It cares whether you're standing at the line at 6 in the morning, alert and ready. So the culture rebuilt itself around the clock instead of around the body. And within a couple of generations, the older two-phase pattern simply stopped being passed down. Doctors began treating any deviation from that one block as a medical problem worth fixing. Entire industries grew up around curing something that, for nearly all of human history, was considered an unremarkable feature of being alive. You inherited a body built for 2 sleeps, and a culture that only believes in 1. No wonder the 2 don't match.
This is where the science quietly turns into something personal. When you wake at 3 a.m. now, your mind doesn't fill that space with fire tending or low conversation with a neighbor. It fills it with worry about sleep, about tomorrow, about the simple fact that you're awake at all. The waking itself is ancient. The dread bolted onto it is not. Your ancestors used those dark, quiet hours for connection and slow, low-stakes thought. You use the same hours to spiral about a deadline or a conversation, or the hours of sleep ticking away while you stare at the ceiling. There's something almost tender hidden in that gap, if you look at it the right way.
The body kept its appointment. It just lost the company that used to come with it. For tens of thousands of years, waking in the night meant someone else nearby was probably awake too, tending the same fire, listening to the same dark. Now, you wake up alone in a quiet room and assume it means something is uniquely wrong with you, when really it might just mean your biology never got the memo that the watchfire went out generations ago. None of this means you should throw away every modern habit and try to live like a forager on the savannah. Your life runs on schedules your ancestors never had to negotiate, alarms and commutes and meetings that don't care what your circadian rhythm prefers. But understanding where the waking comes from can change what you do with it when it happens. Some sleep researchers now point back to the oldest advice as still being the most useful one available.
So the next time you open your eyes in the dark and feel that familiar panic start to rise, try replacing the question. Instead of asking, "Why am I awake?" ask what you might have done with this very hour 10,000 years ago. Maybe you'd be listening to a fire crackle low in its embers. Maybe you'd be lying still, watching the dark, keeping half a mind on the world just past the edge of the light. Maybe you'd be talking quietly with someone else who couldn't sleep either, the two of you sharing the watch without ever calling it that. It's 3 a.m. Your eyes are open, and for the first time, maybe that doesn't feel like something broken. Maybe it just feels like something very old, finally being understood.